Alien girl about to be cooked alive, then a human hero saves her. The space door opened, and the blinding light from the nearby stars shone down directly onto the surface of Talon 4, causing the entire landscape to appear as though it was being heated to the point of boiling. Caleb Wright, a human warrior, felt the strange heat of this planet as he stepped down from the spaceship. The fine red sand pressed against his combat boots, each step heavy, as if the entire planet were trying to swallow him. The harsh sunlight reflected off the shiny battle armor on his back, while sweat dripped from his rugged face, soaking into his thick beard and scattering tiny grains of sand. "Damn, what is this temperature?" Caleb muttered under his breath, adjusting the plasma rifle on his shoulder. "Because of Talon 4's minerals, sir. They're worth approximately 2.3 million credits." Vera, Caleb's AI assistant, spoke through his earpiece. "Just as you said, so we can't quit halfway. Why not let the Zorathians take it all, and I stay home drinking, Vera?" Caleb scoffed, though a hint of doubt began to rise within him. Caleb's gaze fell upon the scene ahead. A Zorathian settlement, the powerful and bloodthirsty tribe, hidden beneath large rock formations. The crude yet effective stone houses, the thick smoke rising from several bonfires, and the towering muscular figures of the Zorathian warriors with their dry gray-green skin. Their yellow eyes gleamed with the cold, predatory gaze of a tiger, scanning Caleb, as if watching his every move. "Remember," Vera's voice came through, warning, "the Zorathians worship strength above all. Don't let them see any sign of weakness." "Yeah, I know," Caleb replied resolutely, taking a deep breath and stepping into the center of the settlement. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the scorching air. Caleb turned around, his sharp gaze catching sight of a figure dangling from a crude metal frame near the large fire where the Zorathians had gathered. An alien woman, her skin glowing a brilliant gold as if forged from the hottest flames, was lying motionless, tightly bound. Her violet eyes shone brightly in the firelight, locking onto Caleb's, and she cried out in desperate distress. "Help me," she called out in a clear yet desperate voice. "Please, help me." Caleb froze, unable to believe what he was seeing. This woman was unlike any creature he had ever encountered. Kira Solon, a member of Valen, a rare species, her beauty unmistakable and unlike any other race. And now she was being offered as a meal for the bloodthirsty Zorathians. "What the hell is this?" Caleb muttered. "I can't let this happen." Looking into Kira's terrified yet hopeful eyes, an odd sensation gripped Caleb. Though he didn't understand why, he knew he couldn't stand still. It was time, he had to act. "How much?" Caleb asked coldly, but with unwavering determination, facing the Zorathian chieftain who was standing nearby, sneering. "She's a special delicacy, you can't buy her," the Zorathian chieftain scoffed. "She's not a meal, I want her," Caleb replied, his hand firmly gripping his weapon. "All my weapons in exchange for her." A flicker of surprise appeared in the chieftain's eyes, followed by calculation. Finally, he gestured, and two Zorathian warriors stepped forward, releasing Kira from the frame. Caleb didn't think any further. He swiftly cut the ropes binding her with a quick swipe of his knife, letting her fall gently into his arms. The two stared at each other for a long moment, and then Kira whispered her thanks. "My name is Kira Solon. Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of resolve. "Caleb Wright, don't worry, we're leaving here right now," Caleb replied, his heart already prepared for the battle he knew would not be easy. As Caleb and Kira left the Zorathian settlement, the situation became incredibly tense. After the weapons deal was completed and Kira was rescued, the two quickly realized they couldn't easily escape this planet. The Zorathians, known for their brutality and strong fighting spirit, weren't about to let them leave without a price. "We won't be able to run for long," Caleb said to Kira, his voice filled with worry, but also determination. "They're chasing us." Kira looked at him with resolve. "Running isn't an option for us." She reached for the weapon Caleb had given her earlier, a thin, sharp sword, attached to her body and always ready to strike on command. They quickly began moving across the vast sand dunes, Caleb's eyes scanning the area around them. At this point, everything could turn into a fight for their lives in an instant. The landscape around them was filled with massive rocks and deep, treacherous ravines where the light seemed to be swallowed up, leaving only darkness and the unseen threat from behind. Kira, despite being bound by fear and pain, showed no sign of weakness. She moved powerfully and confidently, her sharp violet eyes constantly surveying the surroundings as if she had overcome many dangerous situations like this before. Caleb realized something. She wasn't just an alien girl under threat. She was a warrior, someone whose calmness and decisiveness could save them in this situation. And then, as the winds began to die down and the sky around them darkened, Kira decided to open up to Caleb. She looked at him with a deep gaze, as though making an important decision. "You want to know why I'm on this planet, don't you?" Kira began, her voice cold but not lacking sincerity. Caleb, still tense but curious, nodded slightly. "I'm not just a diplomat," she said, a faint smile on her lips, though her eyes still held worry. "I'm also a warrior from Valen. My mission is to find allies to fight against a greater threat, Drakar Dominion." "Drakar Dominion?" Caleb asked, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "That name sounds familiar." Kira frowned, her expression turning serious. "They are invaders, taking over entire planets in the region. My people have lived in isolation for many years, but now we have to face this threat. And I am part of the plan." Caleb felt as though an invisible wall between him and Kira had shattered. She was no longer just a woman in distress. She was a warrior, a courageous individual with a purpose far greater than her own life. What Caleb had thought about her began to change. No longer a captive in need of rescue, Kira now felt like a teammate he needed to protect and support. Kira continued her story, speaking about her mission. "I carry something precious, a fire crystal, an item that holds vital military information. It contains data about Drakar Dominion's strategies, their next military moves, and weaknesses in their plans. This crystal could change the course of the war and give my people a chance to fight back." Caleb was silent for a moment, unsure of what to say. He looked at the fire crystal Kira wore around her neck, a glowing red stone, as though it contained the life and death of an entire people. "So, if I help you complete this mission, can we end this war?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity and doubt. Kira looked at him, her violet eyes lighting up with determination. "Yes, but not just us. We need strong allies, and I can't do this alone." The relationship between Caleb and Kira, which had started with his impulsive rescue, was now becoming a stronger collaboration than ever before. Caleb was no longer just her protector, but also a part of her larger plan. Now, they were not only running from enemies, but also facing a bigger war, a war they had to fight together to bring hope to the invaded worlds. Suddenly, loud noises rang out from the distance. A group of Zorathians riding on hover vehicles sped through, armed with sophisticated weapons, their cold yellow eyes fixed on Kira and Caleb. With no other choice, Caleb decided to switch to defense mode. "Follow my lead," Caleb said, his voice calm and clear, as he quickly began to assess their tactics. He lifted his plasma rifle and started firing at the Zorathian warriors, each shot hitting its target, forcing the pursuers to dodge. But Kira didn't just stand there observing. She swung the sword attached to her body with a practiced motion, like a dancer with a sharp weapon in hand. With a powerful strike, she knocked one Zorathian off his vehicle, sending him tumbling into the sand. "You're really strong," Caleb exclaimed, his eyes wide, surprised by Kira's skill. Kira merely smiled lightly, her violet eyes full of resolve. "I've been trained my whole life, not just in diplomacy." She lifted the sword once more, ready to face the advancing enemies. As the Zorathian vehicles charged toward them, Kira leapt into the air, descending like a shadow. She used her sword to knock a Zorathian off his vehicle while her other hand shot out, sending powerful sparks that engulfed the enemy in a fierce flame. The Zorathians didn't expect her to unleash fire from her hands, a special ability that wasn't seen in any of their records. You can do that?" Caleb asked, awe and admiration evident on his face. "It's just a little ability," Kira smiled, though her voice remained serious. "What about you? Your fighting skills are impressive." Caleb had no time to respond, as more Zorathian warriors began to surround them. Unable to be trapped between the massive monsters, Caleb and Kira decided to retreat toward a large rock formation nearby. As they returned fire, Caleb quickly pulled Kira into the shelter of the boulder, seeking cover from the Zorathian vehicle's attacks. At this moment, Caleb completely trusted Kira. She was no longer just a diplomat or a captive. She was a true warrior, capable of facing any enemy. "We need to act quickly," Caleb said, checking his weapon. "There might be more of them after us. Vera, is there any way you can help us?" Vera's voice came through his earpiece. "Calculating route. I'll adjust the ship's energy, but it'll take at least 10 more minutes." 10 minutes? Caleb's voice dropped. "We don't have time." But then, everything suddenly changed. A group of Zorathians approached closer. With no way out, Kira and Caleb stood up, ready for the final battle to escape their dangerous predicament. Kira firmly gripped her sword, her eyes shining with determination as she saw Caleb's resolve. "Let me help you," Kira said to Caleb, her voice cold yet full of courage. She was not only fighting to survive, but also to protect her mission. "Together, we'll defeat them." A sandstorm swept across the sky, making everything appear hazy. The Zorathian vehicles raced across the ground, their wheels crushing the fine sand and creating waves of dust. The roar of their engines echoed through the empty space, overwhelming anyone unfamiliar with the harsh battlefield. Under the setting sun, the Zorathian warriors, with their gray-black skin and cold yellow eyes, looked like predatory beasts preparing to finish off their prey. Kira and Caleb stood face to face with dozens of Zorathians, their massive forms like boulders, weapons ready to end anyone who dared to challenge them. Caleb quickly leaned behind a large rock, his plasma rifle steady in his hand, his eyes focused on the target. Kira stood right beside him, her hand tightly gripping the sword embedded in her body, her gaze fixed on the advancing enemies. "Don't let them get too close," Caleb shouted over the comms, directing the formation as the tension mounted. The first Zorathians charged forward, riding their sturdy vehicles, raising their crude but powerful weapons. Caleb aimed and fired. The explosive sound of each plasma shot rang out, the blue flashes streaking through the air. One Zorathian vehicle was hit, flipping onto the sand. However, the enemies didn't falter, continuing their charge as if unharmed. They were too numerous, too powerful. Kira wouldn't stay still. She charged forward, a swift, sharp swing of her sword slashing through the air, cutting down a Zorathian who was about to shoot Caleb. Her sword created sharp diagonal lines in the air, each movement a perfect combat dance. She didn't just use the sword, she also unleashed fire from her hands, attacking the surrounding enemies. A wave of flames erupted from her palms, striking directly at a group of Zorathians. They fell, burning fiercely in the intense fire. "Watch out!" Caleb yelled as a Zorathian suddenly charged from behind Kira, aiming to strike her with a massive axe. But Kira reacted in time. She jumped high, evading the powerful blow from the Zorathian, then immediately used her sword to knock the axe from the enemy's hand. Kira knelt, her legs firm like a true warrior, and in one smooth motion she spun, driving the sword into the Zorathian's chest. "Done!" Kira gasped, her eyes still full of resolve as she quickly stepped back to protect Caleb. Caleb turned to her, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. "I've never seen anyone fight like you." "First time for you, huh?" Kira smiled lightly, but didn't pay much attention to the compliment. "We don't have time to stop." At that moment, another group of Zorathians appeared from the right, led by a giant warrior with a large hammer, slamming it into the ground and sending sand flying like waves. The Zorathians in vehicles sped up, charging toward them like wild beasts. "We can't let ourselves be surrounded," Caleb said, and he quickly moved toward a large rock nearby to gain an advantage. Just then, Vera, Caleb's AI assistant, spoke through the earpiece. "Caleb, I've completed the route calculation. The ship will be ready in 5 minutes. You need to hold on a little longer." Kira looked at Caleb, her eyes shining in the dark. 5 minutes. We have to hold out until then." With no other choice, Caleb and Kira decided to attack. Caleb aimed at the lead vehicle, pulled the trigger, and shot at its weak point. A series of blasts ripped through the vehicle's body, and it burst into flames, exploding in midair. The vehicle fell, and the Zorathians on it were thrown off their positions. But right after that, a larger vehicle came charging toward them, carrying 2 fully armed Zorathians. One of them jumped down, swinging a massive axe at Caleb. Caleb quickly dodged and landed a powerful punch to the Zorathian's face, sending him crashing to the ground. Kira, by now, wasn't just standing still. She swung her arm, sending a large burst of fire that engulfed another Zorathian, causing him to scream in agony as his body burned to ashes. Another Zorathian, seeing his comrade being attacked, charged toward them, roaring like an animal, but Caleb managed to shoot him down before he could strike. "We're almost there!" Caleb shouted as he saw the wall of Zorathians surrounding them beginning to shrink. "Vera, how much longer?" "The ship is ready, Caleb," Vera's voice answered confidently this time. "Move now!" Caleb and Kira sprinted toward the path leading to the ship, dodging past the large rocks, avoiding the last few attacks from the Zorathians. They were so close to safety. But the battle wasn't over yet, and their quick steps grew more tense as the Zorathians behind them kept up their pursuit. Finally, after a series of rapid movements, Caleb and Kira reached the ship. Caleb quickly gestured for Kira to board while he continued firing to protect the entrance. As the ship's door closed, he let out a sigh of relief. They had survived a deadly battle, and now only the challenges ahead remained. Once aboard the Nomad, Caleb and Kira began checking all the ship's systems to prepare for the dangerous journey to Helios Prime. The atmosphere on the ship was heavy, filled with tension and exhaustion after their escape from the Zorathians. But one thing was clear. Both knew that the road ahead would be even more difficult. Caleb sat in the pilot's seat, his hands expertly navigating the controls. He checked the ship's power and shields, then glanced over at Kira, who was standing by the hatch, her hand gently touching the fire crystal around her neck. "Do you think we'll be okay?" Kira asked, her eyes filled with doubt. "The Drakar Dominion isn't an easy opponent, especially with the siege we're facing." Caleb shrugged, not showing any sign of panic. "If we play it right, they'll never know who we are. Ever heard of deception tactics? A Drakar supply ship would never suspect a strange ship. We just need to disguise ourselves as one of them." Kira nodded, but doubt still glimmered in her eyes. "I just fear it won't be that simple. Drakar Dominion has extremely advanced surveillance technology, and they'll easily spot any differences, no matter how small. That's why we have to make the most of what we've got." Caleb turned to look at her, his eyes gleaming with determination. "You told me about the fire crystal and the military data in it. It's the key to breaking this siege and giving your people a chance to fight back. We can't fail." She looked at him, trust slowly replacing the worry in her gaze. Kira knew this fight wasn't just about her or Caleb. It was a fight for the future of her people and all the other worlds threatened by the Drakar Dominion. "You're right, we won't fail," Kira replied, her voice filled with resolve. "But I need to tell you something. When we reach Helios Prime, I won't just hand over the fire crystal to my allies. We'll face even greater dangers, and I can't let anyone else know about the power I'm hiding. The Drakar Dominion won't just fight with weapons, they'll use every means to weaken us from within. Be prepared for everything." Caleb didn't speak, simply nodding in understanding. They were no longer just running and trying to survive. Now they were leaders, bearing the mission of saving an entire people. After a few hours, the Nomad neared the Helios Prime star system, where a Valen military base was being surrounded by the forces of Drakar Dominion. Both knew that everything would unfold differently than they had imagined. The Drakar Dominion forces were not only strong militarily, but also possessed highly sophisticated surveillance technology and strategies. "This is the first time I feel like I'm playing a very dangerous game," Caleb said, his voice calm but filled with tension as they approached Helios Prime. Kira stood beside him, her hand gripping the sword attached to her body. "We'll make them think we're a Drakar supply ship, but we have to pretend we know nothing about the ongoing battles. Everything must be perfect." "Then we need to finish the job quickly," Caleb replied, his hands on the ship's controls as he slowed the ship's speed. He looked at the information systems on the screen, double-checking all the data before infiltrating the besieged area. "The communication system will be key. I've set up an identification code to match a supply ship, but we can't afford to make any mistakes. One slip-up, and we'll be exposed." Entering the space near Helios Prime, a dense black wall of Drakar Dominion warships appeared before them. The giant Drakar ships, with their thick armor and heavy weapons, stood still in space like monsters waiting for prey. They had to get past them without being detected, without any resistance. Kira turned to Caleb, her eyes filled with worry, but also determination. "We only have one chance. If we're detected, not just Fire Crystal, but we'll both be in danger." "We will succeed," Caleb said with certainty, taking a deep breath. "It's time to do this." With everything set in place, Caleb and Kira began executing their bold strategy. They disguised themselves as a Drakar supply ship, using false identities, communication signals, and recognition systems set up to mimic a standard supply vessel of the Drakar Empire. As the ship entered the besieged area, everything went smoothly, at least until they got closer to the Valen military base. Once again, Caleb maneuvered the ship into a space between Drakar warships, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as he realized they were close to the infiltration zone. The ship's communication system had recognized their signal, but there were still cracks in their plan. A Drakar surveillance ship was beginning to approach. "We have to go now, Caleb," Kira said urgently. "If they identify us, everything is over." Caleb slammed the throttle, sending the ship into the shadows of the base, quickly passing through the checkpoints without being detected. But as they entered the base, another challenge emerged. They were faced with Drakar's elite forces, specially trained warriors capable of identifying enemies. A fierce battle erupted right at the landing area. Caleb and Kira had to fight not only to protect themselves, but also to complete their crucial mission, getting the Fire Crystal into the hands of Valen's allies before the Drakar Dominion discovered their plot. This battle was not just a physical assault, it was also a fight of intellect and strategy. Caleb and Kira knew that if they failed, all hope would be lost. As the Nomad glided past defense systems and entered the Valen base area, both Caleb and Kira could feel the tension hanging in the air. They had deceived the Drakar Dominion surveillance ships, but an uneasy feeling began to rise in them. Getting into the base was just the first step of a highly risky infiltration. And when the ship's door opened, the unavoidable truth became clear. They had been discovered. An alarm blared throughout the base, red lights flashing and illuminating every corner. Caleb and Kira exchanged a look, their eyes filled with resolve, knowing that there was no turning back now. "We must protect the Fire Crystal. We can't let them take it," Caleb growled, drawing his plasma rifle and quickly checking it. Without hesitation, Kira unsheathed the sharp sword embedded in her body and stood ready. "They won't have the chance to take anything. Don't worry, I'll clear the way for you." With those words, they rushed out of the ship's cabin and headed toward the center of the base, where the crucial data was stored and where the Fire Crystal needed to be delivered. Drakar Dominion soldiers were ready to strike. The powerful warriors, wearing dark armor and wielding heavy weapons, had already surrounded the area. Caleb ran while shooting, plasma shots cutting through the dark space. One Drakar soldier charged at him, swinging a massive hammer at his head. But Caleb quickly dodged and fired a shot at his back, sending the soldier crashing to the ground. At the same time, Kira dove into the battle with the sword embedded in her body. She swung it swiftly, each strike sharp and lightning fast. Each swing sent a Drakar soldier crashing to the ground, unable to react. Sparks flew from her hands, igniting the enemies in clouds of smoke and flame. The combination of her skilled swordplay and fire abilities made her a formidable opponent, unstoppable. "You're doing great," Kira shouted as she saw Caleb fighting a group of Drakar charging toward them. Caleb smiled, but didn't have time to respond. He was used to fighting alone, but working with Kira made him feel like part of a seasoned squad. She moved like a shadow, always where he needed her, while he controlled the situation with his strategic prowess. As the two fought fiercely, a new group of Drar soldiers suddenly appeared from a side door, cutting off their path to the center of the base. This group was heavily armed, and they began surrounding them. They were not only physically powerful, but also had a very tight coordination in their tactics. Kira didn't hesitate. She charged into the enemy's ranks, breaking up the Drakar forces with precise strikes. She unleashed a fierce wave of fire toward the front, forcing them to scatter, but it was only a tactic to reposition herself and approach the enemies from another angle. Caleb quickly recognized the opportunity and executed a surprise strategy. He fired a barrage at the commander, hitting him and knocking him to the ground. Immediately, the remaining Drakar soldiers were thrown into confusion and began scattering, no longer led by a commander. "This is our chance," Caleb shouted, pushing Kira toward the room containing the data. Kira said nothing, only nodded and continued moving swiftly. Both knew that this was a decisive moment. Every second counted. As they neared the fire crystal storage area, a large door suddenly opened, and a Drakar battalion launched a powerful attack from the other side. This time, the enemy didn't retreat, but charged into the battle with all their might. Caleb took a deep breath, quickly calculating their strategy in his mind. "We can't let ourselves get cornered. You lead, I'll cover the rear." Without hesitation, Kira charged in, her sword swinging with force, cutting off any incoming attacks from the Drakar. She moved like lightning, each strike shaking the room, and the enemy couldn't react fast enough. Every swing resulted in a deadly blow, and with her ability to unleash fire, she turned the Drakar soldiers into shadows of flame. Caleb was equally fierce. He quickly adjusted his position, firing continuously at the Drakar soldiers advancing toward them, each shot finding its mark. But when a Drakar soldier charged from behind, Caleb swiftly pulled out his combat knife and thrust it through his armor, knocking the soldier off balance and sending him crashing to the ground. Finally, after a series of intense attacks, the perfect combination of Caleb and Kira helped them completely defeat the Drakar army. As the last of the Drakar soldiers fell, Caleb and Kira stood facing each other, breathing heavily, but their eyes gleamed with determination. "We've won," Caleb sighed, his eyes lighting up with satisfaction. Kira smiled, though the exhaustion was evident in her expression. "This is just the beginning, Caleb. We still have a long road ahead." With this victory, they had secured control of an important area, but the threat from the Drakar Dominion was far from over. After a challenging and perilous battle, Caleb and Kira had succeeded in getting the fire crystal into the hands of Vaylon. The military base, once surrounded by the Drakar Dominion, was no longer a place that held the hope of Kira's people captive. Kira had not only saved the crucial crystal, but she had also created an opportunity for Vaylon to fight back against the growing threat of the Drakar Dominion. Once all the important data had been transmitted, and Vaylon's allies took control of the base, Kira turned to Caleb, her eyes shining not only with victory, but also with the deepening bond between them. "You did it," Kira said, her voice warm yet filled with understanding. "You didn't just fight for yourself, you helped me complete a mission that I couldn't have done without you." Caleb, though tired and bearing wounds from the battle, no longer looked like the solitary man who had first embarked on this journey. He looked at Kira and smiled. "Just doing what needed to be done," Caleb replied, but the change in his voice and eyes was clear. He was no longer someone who only sought personal gain. This battle wasn't just about fighting the Drakar Dominion. It was a fight for a greater ideal, an ideal that he now fully believed in. Kira looked at him, her eyes shining like stars in the dark night. "You've changed, Caleb. You know, I don't just need a skilled warrior. I need someone who fights for ideals, for the freedom of oppressed peoples, and you've become that person." Caleb stood silently for a moment, letting Kira's words sink deep into his mind. When he began this journey, he only thought of himself, of the benefits he could gain from the deals he made. But now, everything had changed. He was fighting for a higher cause, for the freedom of peoples who were oppressed and shunned by an ever-growing invasive empire. Kira stepped closer to him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. The warmth of her gesture made him feel the deep connection between them. "Caleb, I know this isn't easy, but I want you to fight alongside me. I need you. We need you. The fight against the Drakar Dominion has only just begun. What we've done is just the first step, and I can't do it alone." Caleb looked into Kira's eyes, his own filled with no more doubt or hesitation. He now knew where he was going and what he had to do. He was no longer just a lone warrior. He was part of a team, part of a battle for freedom. "I'll go with you, Kira," Caleb said, his voice resolute. "What I'm looking for is no longer wealth or power. I've found my purpose and ideals fighting beside you. I won't turn back, and I'll fight until the end to bring freedom to these people." Kira smiled, her smile full of empathy and trust in her companion. "I believe in you, and I know we will win." They stood in silence, gazing out of the ship's window where the stars twinkled across the vast expanse of the universe. They both knew the road ahead would not be easy. The Drakar Dominion was not a small opponent, and fighting against them would be a battle not only of strength, but also of intelligence, courage, and perseverance. But in their hearts, there was no doubt. They had chosen the path of fighting for freedom, and they would not turn back. "Well then, let's get started," Caleb said, his eyes blazing with determination. Kira nodded, her gaze full of hope. "Yes, we will fight for the freedom of all people, and we will win." The story ends with Caleb's deep realization that sometimes the most risky decisions lead to the greatest turning points in life. Before starting this journey, he was just a lone warrior, seeking personal gain. But now, he had become part of a larger fight, a fight for freedom and peace for the oppressed peoples under the Drakar Dominion. The challenges he and Kira had faced were not just about battle, but about the choices they made, the choices to protect the values they believed in. He was no longer fighting only for himself. He understood now that in this war, unity, resilience, and responsible decisions would be the strength to move forward. Together with Kira, he wasn't just fighting for a common goal. They were fighting for freedom, for the future of all beings in this universe. Kira, his steadfast companion, had become an inseparable part of Caleb's life. They were not just battle partners, but friends, people who could share their worries, joys, and hopes for a better future. Despite the challenges ahead, they were ready to face whatever difficulties came their way. "We'll make it," Caleb said, his voice firm. "Together, we will overcome it all." Kira smiled at him, her eyes shining with belief. "Yes, Caleb, we'll fight not just for today, but for a future of freedom and peace." With those words, they continued on their path, hand in hand, not just as warriors, but as companions, facing every challenge ahead together. Their journey was not just about fighting the enemy, but also about discovering themselves, about sacrifice and the strength of friendship. And Caleb knew that no matter how tough the battle got, as long as they stood by each other, nothing would be impossible.